2022 five-star offensive lineman Josh Conerly out of Rainier Beach in Seattle has set his commitment date. He will be announcing his commitment on April 8th. Let's see if we have some more details there as far as when that's going to be happening. I believe I saw it was going to be on CBS Sports HQ at 9 o'clock Eastern. So that's 6 p.m. for us folks out here on the West Coast. Let's see here. I'm going to get these highlights up so we can talk about Connerly a little bit. Just bear with me here while I manage all the elements on my screen. All right. Here we go. Share screen. Oh my gosh. Why is it always trying to reset this for me? All right.
I'll get some elevator music for you while we're getting set up here, just to keep.
I'm sorry. No, I'm trying not to. It's for some stupid reason it's saying that StreamYard doesn't have screen sharing permissions. That's okay. We don't need it. But let's just talk about Josh Connerly, because that's really the main target that's left on board for the Ducks here in the 2022 recruiting class. Like I said, highly touted offensive lineman out of the Pacific Northwest. So you got to figure that makes him even more of a priority for the Ducks, because he's one of the best targets that's closer to home for the Ducks. With Oregon, there's not as many high-level prospects on a year-in, year-out basis, but Washington, in particular, the Seattle area, has really started to pump out some high-profile recruits. You look at Emeka Egbuka recently, JT Tuimoloau. Both of those guys are at Ohio State after coming out of the state of Washington. But to kind of set the stage here for Connerly a little bit more, he was recently in Eugene for his official visit at the beginning of the month. At that same weekend, they brought in Levius Overton, Micaiah Overton, some really highly regarded defensive linemen that the Ducks are trying to add here this cycle after LT Overton reclassified to 2023. And then for Connerly, he's working from a top 6 as he goes and works towards this decision coming up here on April 8th, like I mentioned. And let's see, those schools in the top 6 for Connerly are Washington, Oklahoma, Oregon, Michigan, USC, and Miami. So lots of pretty talented schools in the running here. What are some of your thoughts as far as maybe Oregon's chances in this commitment, in this recruitment, or just any of your thoughts on Connerly?
Yeah, I think just being able to keep establishing your footing, especially as a new head coaching staff in the Pacific Northwest, is huge. They've already done a really good job keeping some of those California and Washington guys, Dave Yulee specifically, home in Eugene per se. But Connerly is one of those guys that I just felt like, I like that they were able to get the visit when they did with so much talent there. It really showed that they mean business in his recruitment. They haven't given up despite the coaching change. So I like that they're still in on him, and he appears, to be considering them at least. But I think that I've always kind of leaned towards USC in this battle, and the fact that they get the last visit, I believe, is kind of just I think a testament to what they've been able to do in his recruitment, and I think they really need some of that beef in the trenches. But this kind of reminds me of the battle of JT Tuimoloau, where it was one last 2021 guy, and we're waiting for him to make his decision. Connerly, I believe he said he was going to make it a bit earlier in 2022, and then started taking some visits, and he plays basketball as well, and and now he finally announced April 8th, and it feels like a lot of people are saying different schools. I've seen some people say, well, they think Miami might be a leader. They think Michigan might be a leader. Different people hear different things. I feel like this is going to be a really tough battle for Oregon, but I like what I've heard from other guys, especially along the offensive line with Dillingham and Adrian Clem. It seems like those guys are phenomenal recruiters, phenomenal coaches. I like Oregon's chances. I just think it's going to be an uphill battle against some of those top tier programs.
Yeah, for USC, I think if you're looking at them in this recruitment and kind of where they're coming from, Lincoln Riley's going to be able to get those skill guys, those running backs, those receivers. Look at Malachi Nelson. He basically committed to USC before Lincoln Riley got the job. Not actually, but that was how fast it was. And he's got to realize, that staff has to realize, that building inside out is something that they're going to have to do. The trench play just has not been up to par of late. and they have some pretty talented guys there. If you look at Corey Foreman, he was the top player in the country in 2021. Huge get for them to be able to keep him home in the recruiting battle. And Michigan was definitely someone that I was hearing about a while ago, but it seems like this is really shaping up to be a 2-team battle. He did get out to Oklahoma and Miami. You look at Mario Cristobal and Alex Mirabal, they obviously had that previous relationship with Connerly from their time at Oregon. But I also think a guy that we have to consider here is Josh Henson, the new offensive coordinator and offensive line coach out there in LA. I think he's really a quality recruiter. If you consider what he did at A&M and being able to bring him over, A&M signed the top class in 247 sports history, I think it was, this most recent year. And Josh Henson's a guy that is going to be a huge piece of this Lincoln Riley staff. So you got to figure that he's been doing his thing and he's a talented recruiter in his own right. So that's kind of what I wanted to say about USC. You just got to think that playing for someone who is a proven offensive mind in Lincoln Riley certainly has its appeal. But for the Ducks, Adrian Clem is also a guy who has a good track record from his time at UCLA and then working at the NFL level. I think that's something that a lot of these guys want in their recruitment. They want to be sold. Sure, there's a bunch of different factors, the facilities, NIL is obviously a huge thing in recruiting overall. I'm not saying so much so in Connerly's case, but at the end of the day, Dylan, these guys wanted to go to the league. Like, that's really what I think a lot of people are focused on. It's not so much the national championships. It's not so much the glamour of college football. They want to get to the league at the end of the day. And I think if you have a guy that has a lot of NFL experience like Clem does, and he knows how recruiting works, I think that I got to give the Ducks a pretty decent shot here. And the other thing that I wanted to mention was how Lanning and his staff have prioritized building relationships with schools in the Pacific Northwest, with trainers and 7-on-7 programs as well. I know that Lanning, I think he had a dinner with Tracy Ford, who's a Team Ford Sports Performance, the founder. So it's just a lot of different pieces here are at play. And I feel like even though it's a top 6, it really feels like, to me, like all signs are pointing to Oregon versus USC in this one once it finally comes to a decision.
Well, I think his top 6 is a really smart top 6 for him if he wants to get to the league, if that is a priority, just because a lot of these schools have really produced really top, talented and high level offensive linemen the last few years. You think about Michigan last year won the Joe Moore Award for the best offensive line in the country. And I think, honestly, the USC offensive line thing, I think their offensive line was really underrated last year. I thought they were, a really good group working with, the off and on quarterback battles with Slovis and Dart. There is a bit of an overhaul there, like you said, with the coach. And I believe there are a couple of new faces that are going to be starting along the offensive line for them. But I really think that he can't really go wrong here with whoever he chooses. He's gotten to visit, I think, most, if not all, of these schools. But I think USC is a really good choice for him. I think Washington is one of those that is kind of in the back of my mind that, it's the hometown school that he's from, Rainier Beach. It's right there. He's gotten out there a few times. I think that's a school I wouldn't sleep on. But at the end of the day, if winning is a factor for him, not to slight any, there's not going to be any Washington fans here. We're Ducks Digest.
Hey, you never know. They'll get here sometimes.
You never know. But I think for him, I think the best choices would be an Oregon, a Michigan, or a USC, just because of their ability to get guys to the league and get guys to develop. I think a couple years as a starter. And even Miami. I mean, we looked at Mario Cristobal and Alex Mirabal. You talked about them for a minute. A lot of the guys along Oregon's offensive line that are coming back are all, products of them and what they've been able to do at Oregon. So I really think that when you look at everybody on this list, you can't really go wrong for him. But I think Oregon, if they were to get a guy like Connerly, that would be massive, because they're going to be losing pretty much everybody after this upcoming season when you look at 2023, there's going to be a lot of new faces up there. And Josh Connerly would be a prime candidate to be a starter.
And Dylan, maybe that's the last point that we can kind of put a bow on this story for today with is the fact that Oregon's offensive line is incredibly experienced this year, but now we're kind of entering that point where how confident are you in the two deep? I mean, you got to be confident in that first group, but as far as rotational guys that came in last year heavily, you look at Stephen Jones and Justin Jaramillo. I figure that Jones is probably in a better spot for a big piece of playing time, but Jaramillo is going to be right there with him all throughout spring ball, I would think. But aside from that, you don't have a lot of guys that have played a ton of football behind him. Logan Sagapolu transferred to Miami. He was a guy that was getting a ton of hype, not only from the coaching staff, but also from players. So even though he didn't play at Oregon, he was figuring to be a guy that could definitely be involved down the line. But to that point, you have a lot of young guys that are showing a lot of promise as recruits. You look at Bram Walden, Jalen Jeffers, Faupe Laulu. He's a huge guy. So these guys are going to be put in a position where they might have to play some younger guys. And then you also have Jackson Powers Johnson, who's starting spring ball on the defensive line, but maybe they realize that I feel like the defensive line is probably the group that I almost want to say the most confident about right now on the defensive side of the ball, just because of the transfers that have been added, the reinforcements that they got on the recruiting trail as well. But Connerly, to get it back to him, I think that if you can add him, it'll really help kind of lessen the blow of all that attrition they saw along the offensive line in the 2022 recruiting class with Kelvin Banks, Cameron Williams, both going to Texas, but they were able to hang on to Michael Wooten and then ultimately get Dave Yulee back in the fold. So you can't underscore the importance of keeping those guys.
Yeah, and then I think once they bring him on, if they were to get Connerly and bring him on, it would be a pretty quick. Obviously, I think it's better that he's committing in April than like JTT was in, I think it was early August. So they could bring him in the fall and he would be, getting ready to go. But I think just being able to have a West Coast guy, a Washington guy at that, a guy that so many Washington fans have been saying, like he's a lock to go to Washington for, I don't know, 2 years now. I feel like if they were to go into that state, into their backyard and get a guy like Josh Connerly, that would just be a big, big bragging right for Oregon over Washington of the many, it feels like, on the recruiting trail.
No doubt about it. The Ducks have long been, I want to say at least, certainly since Chris Peterson left, the Ducks have been absolutely killing it on the recruiting trail compared to the Huskies. But 5-star offensive lineman Josh Connerly will be deciding between those 6 schools that we talked about just before here. He'll be deciding on April 8th for his commitment, and we'll keep you guys up to date on that commitment. I'm going to do some more digging to see if I can get some intel on kind of how things are looking with him in that recruitment.